This
The first time I
monstrosity
saw
is
what
a
the
clear
homeowner
violation of the
association had done
homeowner
to my
agreement.
garage
That
door,
truck is not
I was
permitted
standing in
in
my
this neighborhood,
driveway in
and this
full
eyesore
mid-morning
has to
sun,
go
coffee in one
immediately.
hand,
I
wearing my
told you this
black
would
and red
not
checkered
stand.
flannel
That
shirt, just
vehicle is
enjoying the bright
oversized and
quiet, when my
unauthorized.
eyes hit
Tear
the
it
sheet
down
of
right
steel
now
bolted
or
across
face
the
legal
outside of my
action.
monster truck bay, and my brain stalled like a flooded engine. It wasn't a prank. There was a full, solid steel plate covering the entire garage door from top to bottom,
I am
glinting
calling
in
the
the
homeowner
sunlight,
association
held with
right
big
now.
anchor bolts sunk straight into
You
my
are going to be
masonry,
in so
and a
much
stack of
trouble
cinder
for this.
blocks mortared along the lower edge like some kind of bunker wall. And there he was, standing on the sidewalk with his hands on his hips, fat belly pushing against a bright pink dress shirt, black dress pants pressed way too seriously for a Saturday. The president of our homeowner association, 50 years old, red-faced, yelling to one of his board members about how he had finally secured the community from that oversized menace. At first, I honestly thought I had to be dreaming. My monster truck had been sitting quietly in that garage the whole week, covered, tuned, not making a sound. I use it for shows, off-road exhibitions, and the occasional charity event. The neighborhood kids love it. I don't rev it at night. I don't tear up lawns. I respect the rules. But Carl, the homeowner association president, had made it his personal mission to get rid of it since the day he found out what was behind that big garage door. My name is Jason. I'm 40 years old. I build and drive monster trucks for a living. And up until that morning, I thought moving into this cul-de-sac at the edge of the subdivision might give me some peace between events. I bought the corner lot with the extended garage because it was perfect. End of the street, long concrete driveway, and a deep bay tall enough to fit my truck with the body on. The sun hits my driveway most of the day, the grass around it glows bright green, and the sky always seems extra blue over my roof. It looked like a good place to park some horsepower and enjoy quiet mornings. Then Carl got elected. Carl is one of those men who treats a polo field like a boardroom, except he doesn't have a polo field, so he uses the homeowner association instead. He's about 5'9", but his stomach sticks out like he swallowed a keg, and his pink dress shirt is always just a little too tight across the buttons, sleeves rolled once but still too long. His black dress pants are creased like he's heading into a job interview even when he's just walking around yelling about trash cans. The first time he saw my truck, it was a bright Saturday afternoon. I had the garage door open, sunlight pouring in, music low, and I was checking suspension travel on the front left. The truck sat there on 43-inch tires, blue body gleaming, chromed four-link bars catching the light. To me, it was art. To him, it looked like sin. He marched straight up into my driveway, shoes clacking on concrete, face already starting to redden. "Is that street legal?" he shouted, pointing at the truck like it had personally insulted him. I wiped my hands on my flannel. "It's a show truck," I said. "Registered, insured, trailered to events. It doesn't run around the subdivision." He snorted. "This is a quiet neighborhood," he yelled. "Not some circus. That thing is a violation of community standards." I asked him calmly what section of the rules mentioned monster trucks. He didn't have an answer, but he left muttering that he'd look into it. I figured that was the end of it. I was wrong. The letters started first. Notices from the homeowner association stuffed in my mailbox in crisp white envelopes, the logo in the top right corner like a smug little stamp. Unapproved oversized vehicle. Incompatible use of garage space. Potential noise disturbance risk. Each one got more dramatic. I read them on my porch in full sunlight, the words almost comical against the peaceful sound of birds and distant lawnmowers. I responded with copies of the covenants, highlighting that there was no restriction on vehicle type if stored inside a garage. I pointed out that the truck never stayed in the driveway. I laid it all out in plain language. Carl didn't care. A week before the steel plate appeared, I heard him out on the cul-de-sac in the middle of the day, his voice cutting through the warm air. I stepped outside and watched from my front step. He stood in the center of the circle, pink shirt shining, black pants creased, talking to two other board members and a cluster of guys from the street. "This man has a monster truck," he practically screamed. "A literal monster truck. What happens when our property values drop? What happens when it explodes? What about the noise?" One of the guys, a neighbor named Will who buys tickets to my shows, tried to defend me. "He doesn't drive it here," Will said. "He's quiet, he's respectful." Carl waved him off, jowls shaking. "It's a liability," he yelled, "and we will not be held responsible when something goes wrong." I went back inside, my jaw tight. Guys like me fight with wrenches and gears. Guys like him fight with paperwork. I should have known he'd escalate. When I saw the steel, my heart went from shock to a cold, precise anger. I walked up to the sheet, ran my fingers along the edge. It was anchored into my brick with wedge bolts, cinder blocks mortared along the base like a low wall. There was adhesive along the garage door seams, dried, smeared, catching the sun in tacky streaks. Carl saw me inspecting it and strutted up the driveway, shoes crunching on stray gravel. "You'll find the entrance is secured," he shouted. His face was already bright red with heat and excitement, sweat glistening across his forehead. "The homeowner association has deemed that vehicle a risk. It is not leaving that garage until this is resolved." I stared at him. "You sealed my garage door," I said slowly, "on my property without my permission." He smirked. "We enacted an emergency safety measure," he yelled. "You should be grateful. This protects everyone." "You trespassed," I said. "You damaged my structure." His voice got even louder. "You think you can terrorize this community with that thing?" he shouted, pointing toward the hidden truck. "I am tired of living under the threat of your monster. It stays locked up until we decide otherwise." In that moment, I saw it clearly. This man thought he owned my space because his title said President on a letterhead. He thought he could physically cage my property like a teenager taking car keys. What he didn't know was that while he was playing hall monitor with steel plate and cinder blocks, I was a former stunt truck fabricator and driver who understood physics, leverage, and the legal definition of a property line a lot better than him. As I stood there in the bright sunlight staring at that steel, an idea started forming in my head. If he wanted to seal the front, that didn't mean the truck couldn't leave. It just meant it couldn't leave through the front. And if it couldn't roll out, maybe it could fly. Before I ever welded my first 4-link bracket, I worked in a fabrication shop that built ramps for stunt shows. Monster truck jumps, motocross gaps, even car launches for movie sets. It was all math and steel and dirt, all under bright lights or bright sun. Standing in my driveway with the Homeowner Association's illegal armor plate flashing back sunlight in my eyes, I felt that old part of my brain switch on. Behind my house, the lot stretched deeper than most on the street. The developer had given my corner property extra space, a long rectangle of bright green backyard that sloped gently down to a tree line and an 8-foot-tall wooden privacy fence marking the rear boundary of the subdivision. On the other side of that fence, scrub land and then a county drainage corridor. I knew the survey pins. I'd walked them myself. There was enough room between my foundation and my rear property line to do something interesting. But before I started thinking about flying over anything, I needed to deal with the basics. Carl had committed crimes dressed as community safety. I wasn't going to swing blindly. I was going to document. I walked around the side of my house in the bright midday sun, taking photos of every angle of the sealed door. The steel plate, the anchors, the scratches in my brick, the cinder blocks, the adhesive smeared along my painted trim. I took close-ups, wide shots, and a short video explaining what I was seeing, panning from the undisturbed concrete of my driveway to the damage along the door. Then I called my buddy Nate, a contractor down the road, 45, shaved head, always in a gray t-shirt and tool belt, and asked him to swing by. He pulled into my driveway half an hour later, his white work truck gleaming in the sun. When he saw the door, he let out a low whistle. "They did this without your permission?" he asked. "Came in last night while I was out," I said. "No notice, no consent." He walked up, ran his hand over the steel. "That's not even done right," he muttered. "No inspection, no permit, and this adhesive on the door panels, you're going to need a whole new door once that's off." He looked at me. "You want me to write this up? Detailed as possible," I said. "Damage assessment, cost to restore, notes about unauthorized work." He nodded. "You got it." While he measured and scribbled under the bright sun, Carl hovered at the edge of my property, pink shirt glowing, face flushed, shouting at a board member about ungrateful residents. I ignored him. Let him think I was just angry about the metal. I was angry, but I was also calculating. That night, still full daylight stretching long because it was summer, I walked my backyard from foundation to fence, measuring with a long tape, pacing off distances. I looked at my garage from the side and back. The monster truck bay shared a wall with the back of the house but had a small extra section of wall where the old owner had once planned a side access door. They'd never installed it, just framed and sheathed. I'd seen it on the blueprints at closing. There was a section of wall that was literally just studs, sheathing, and siding, no structural load. In other words, a place I could ethically cut open without compromising the house. My fingers itched thinking about it. A rear wall exit plus enough yard to build a long dirt ramp pointed at the back fence. The idea got more real. But the thing about stunts is you don't just build a ramp and hope. You plan. And the other thing about dealing with men like Carl is you don't just jump a fence and hope the law smiles. You prepare your case. The next day, under blazing blue skies, I drove my regular pickup down to the police station and filed a report. Illegal tampering with my property, trespass, vandalism, interference with access to my insured vehicle. I included Nate's written assessment, my photos, and copies of the Homeowner Association notices for context. The officer at the desk, a stocky guy in his 30s with a shaved head and a navy uniform, raised his eyebrows at the pictures. "They actually sealed your garage door shut," he said. "With steel and block," I replied, "without permission, and now he's telling delivery drivers I can't have anything brought here." The officer shook his head. "We'll log this and have someone talk to him," he said. "But you know how these neighborhood things go, it's usually civil until it's not." "I understand," I said. "I just want a record." When I got home, Carl was waiting. He stood in my driveway, pink shirt looking tight, sweat darkening the fabric under his arms, black dress pants creased and shiny in the sun. "You went to the police," he yelled before I even shut my truck door. "You think they're going to help you?" I walked past him toward the house. "You trespassed," I said. "You damaged my property. You blocked access to my vehicle. That's not enforcement, that's vandalism." He followed me up the driveway, voice getting louder. "That monster truck is a menace." He screamed, "This is a family community. You think anyone wants to see that freak machine looming over their kids?" I turned, felt the sun hot on my face, and met his eyes. "You haven't heard it run once," I said. "You haven't seen it leave the driveway. This isn't about safety. This is about you needing something to yell at." He jabbed a finger at my chest. "You will never drive that thing out of here again," he shouted, spittle catching the light as it flew. "Not while I'm president." That was the moment my half-formed idea about flying the truck out stopped being a wild thought and became a mission. I gave him a tight smile. You might want to be careful with absolutes, I said. Sometimes life finds a way over the fences you build. He glared, red-faced and sweating, then stormed off, yelling something about additional action. I went inside, grabbed a notebook, and sat at my kitchen table by the big sliding glass door, sunlight flooding the room. I started sketching. The monster truck weighed about 10,000 pounds. My yard gave me maybe 80 feet of run-up before the ramp. The fence was 8 feet tall. If I cut an exit through the back wall of the garage, I could angle the ramp so the truck hit it straight. The landing zone would be in my own backyard on the other side of the fence if I built a secondary ramp descent parallel to the property line. It would be like jumping over a low wall and landing on a terrace. Insane for a normal person. Tuesday at work for a stunt driver. But just doing the jump wasn't enough. I needed to make sure that when I flew that truck over the property line, I wasn't opening myself up to some twisted, reckless endangerment story. I needed witnesses. I needed safety measures. I needed to announce it in just enough of a way that it showed Carl had every chance to stop behaving like a fool and chose not to. That meant setting the stage in daylight and letting him hang himself with his own ego. I started with the interior. In full bright afternoon sun pouring through my side windows, I cleared out the back corner of the monster truck bay, moving tool chests and parts racks to open up the blank back wall section I'd seen on the plans. I pulled down the drywall and confirmed what I suspected: studs, sheathing, siding. No major electrical, no load-bearing beams. Perfect. I framed a wider opening, strong enough to act as a temporary door once I cut through, and ordered a roll-up metal panel rated for shop exits. It arrived on a flatbed 3 days later, noon sun bouncing off the galvanized steel when the all-mail delivery crew unloaded it into my backyard. I didn't tell them what it was for. I just signed, thanked them, and wheeled it into place with Nate's help. When Nate realized what I was planning, his eyes widened. "You're really going to drive the truck out the back?" he asked, wiping sweat from his forehead, sunlight glinting off the beads. "Not just drive," I said. "Jump." He stared at me, then he grinned. "You're insane," he said. "I like it, but you're going to need a serious ramp." I nodded. "That's where I need dirt, equipment, and a couple of guys who aren't afraid to move some earth in the sun." Over the next week, every bit of work happened in broad daylight. We brought in compactors, bobcats, and trailer loads of filled dirt, all driven by men I'd known from show circuits and contracting gig jobs. No one from the Homeowner Association could accuse us of sneaking. We were operating like any backyard project, just bigger. From the street, all anyone saw was soil going into the back, some grading, nothing special. The ramp itself rose from the yard like a small earth hill, carefully shaped and compacted, the surface planed to a smooth curve, packed with clay and topped with packed stone fine. I calculated the angle and length, double-checking velocities and takeoff forces in my head and on paper at the kitchen table while sunlight lit up the numbers. I wasn't going for a huge stadium gap. I just needed enough lift to clear the 8-foot fence without overshooting my own landing zone. Meanwhile, Carl kept up his campaign. The Homeowner Association sent more letters: unauthorized construction on rear property, suspicious vehicle-related activity. One notice claimed I was altering the terrain in a way that threatened neighborhood drainage. I took photos of every letter in direct sun, then took photos of my work: properly sloped surfaces, intact fence, nothing spilling beyond my line. I printed a sign and staked it in my front yard by the driveway, right at the edge where the steel plate door faced the street. The sign read in big block letters: "Back wall exit construction in progress. Monster truck will be moved legally and safely. Filming day to be announced." By late afternoon, men from the block had wandered over to ask what that meant. I told them the truth. "He sealed my front door," I said, the sunlight catching the steel behind me. "So I'm cutting a new one. And when it's ready, I'm going to run the truck out the back and over my property line in a way he can't argue with." Some of them laughed. Some stared like I had grown a second head. Will just shook his head and grinned. "You're going to jump your own fence?" he asked. "Over his line," I said, "legally, safely, with cameras rolling." I didn't invite Carl to that conversation, but he saw the sign. I know he saw it because the next morning, wearing his usual bright pink shirt and black dress pants, face already flushed though it was barely 10 a.m., he knocked sharply on my front door. When I opened it, he started yelling before I could say a word. "What is this nonsense about a back wall exit?" he shouted, sweat already forming on his upper lip. "What are you planning? Some kind of stunt?" "I'm planning to move my legally owned vehicle off my property," I said. "Since you sealed the front access without permission, I'm creating an alternate." His jowls moved with each shouted word. "You are not doing any kind of stunt in this neighborhood," he yelled. "The Homeowner Association will not allow it." I leaned against the doorframe, feeling the sun hot on my shoulder. "You don't have jurisdiction over what's inside my property line," I said. "You had no right to seal that door. If you want to avoid a spectacle, remove the plate and blocks and we're done." "I'll drive the truck out quietly on the trailer like I always do," he sneered. "That monster truck is never coming out of there," he said. "I'd rather call the police and report you for reckless endangerment than let you terrorize this community." "You already got the police involved," I said. "I filed the first report. They're aware of the situation." That took a bit of color out of his face, but he doubled down, voice rising. "You are not jumping anything," he shouted. "I forbid it." I almost laughed. "You don't own the sky," I said, Or the dirt or my truck, I've been more than patient. You think I'm bluffing? Come watch on filming day. He stormed off, yelling into his phone, probably calling the other board members. Good, let them talk. I wanted as many eyes on this as possible. 2 days later, I scheduled the jump. Midday Saturday, forecast full sun, no clouds. I posted a note on my front door and another on my sign. Engineered stunt on private property Saturday 12:00 p.m. Do not enter yard, filming in progress. I also sent an email to the local police non-emergency address. Brief explanation of the situation, my stunt credentials, the sealed door incident, and the fact that I would be performing a controlled stunt on my own land. I invited them to send a unit to observe if they wanted. I did the same for the fire department. If Carl wanted to whine, he would be complaining to people who already knew both sides of the story. On the morning of the stunt, the sun was so bright it made the newly compacted ramp look like a tan wave frozen in my backyard. The air smelled like dirt and gasoline. I opened the interior access door to the monster truck bay and stepped into the tall space. The big blue truck crouched on its huge tires, ready, the polished shocks gleaming. The front door was still a wall of steel and cinder block. The back wall now had a neat tall opening framed by my new roll-up panel currently up, revealing the run-out path to the ramp. Light poured in, painting the concrete floor in bright rectangles. My heart beat a little faster. I'd done bigger jumps than this in arenas over junk cars and piles of scrap. But this was my home, my yard, my neighbors. I wasn't nervous about the physics. I was keyed up about the message. At 11:30, trucks and cars started parking along the cul-de-sac. Men from the neighborhood walked around the side, stopping at the rope barrier I'd strung along the edge of my lot with "Do Not Enter" signs. 2 police cruisers rolled slowly to a stop at the edge of the circle, sunlight flashing off their white roofs and light bars. 2 male officers got out and took positions across the street, arms folded, eyes watchful but not hostile. A fire department SUV showed up too, a male inspector stepping out with sunglasses on, looking around. Carl appeared, of course, already sweating through his bright pink shirt, black dress pants pulled high, yelling at anyone who would listen. "This is insane," he shouted. "You can't let him do this, he's going to kill someone." One of the officers spoke to him quietly, and I saw him gesture angrily toward my house. The officer shook his head. Whatever he said made Carl's face go even redder. Good. He was learning he wasn't the sheriff of anything. At 11:50, I suited up. No costume, no show gear, just my flannel jeans and a proper 5-point harness in the truck. Helmet on, gloves snug. I fired the engine, and the whole bay filled with the deep chest-vibrating rumble of the big block motor. The sound rolled out the back opening and over the yard, golden sunlight hitting the chrome as the truck eased forward. Out in the cul-de-sac, I heard someone cheer. I also heard Carl screaming something unintelligible. I inched the monster truck to the start position inside the garage, nose pointed at the new opening, then idled there for a moment, engine loping, sunlight framing the ramp outside like a portal. This was it. I gave myself one more mental run-through, the way I always did before a stunt. Throttle position, shift points, speed at the base, launch angle, landing posture. I pictured the ramp as a smooth mathematical curve under the blazing sun. The fence is just an 8-foot visual line I'd glance past in an instant, the landing slope waiting beyond. Then I eased my foot down, felt the engine respond, and rolled the monster truck forward out of the dark of the bay into full daylight. The crowd noise on the other side of my fence swelled. Even though they couldn't see me yet, they could hear the engine and feel the vibrations through the ground. I positioned the truck at the start of the run-up strip I'd carved in the yard, straight and true. Ahead of me, the ramp rose like a small hill back fence at its crest. Behind that fence, I knew, was Carl's precious common area extension, a thin slice of land technically his domain before the county corridor started. The idea of literally flying over his claimed territory made me grin inside my helmet. I glanced once toward the front of the house as much as my view allowed. Through a gap, I saw the line of police vehicles, the fire SUV, and a group of men gathered just beyond my side yard. Carl stood close to the rope, pink shirt a beacon, arms waving as he yelled at an officer, his face bright red and shiny with sweat. I couldn't hear the words over the engine, but I saw the officer gesture toward my property line and shake his head. Whatever Carl's argument was, it wasn't working. Good, time to do my part. I took a breath, rolled my shoulders, and eased the throttle forward. The monster truck surged. The front lifted slightly as the rear tires dug into the turf and then the packed dirt of the run. Sunlight flashed off the hood and cage as I picked up speed, the ramp rushing toward me faster and faster, the fence a blur above it. At the base, everything compressed into sensation. The deep roar of the engine, the feel of the suspension compressing, the sudden controlled launch as the truck climbed the ramp, and then, for a brief second, the weightlessness of leaving the ground. I aimed my eyes at the landing slope, not the fence, and trusted the math in my gut. In that instant, I saw over the fence, the narrow slice of common land, Carl's domain, and beyond that the county corridor, all of it lit by bright sun. The truck cleared the top of the fence with room to spare. I felt the nose dip slightly, tapped the throttle, and landed exactly where I'd planned, the rear suspension soaking the impact like a big animal dropping to all fours. The crowd noise from the front erupted, then shouts, cheers, a couple of whoops from the officers. I eased off the throttle and let the truck idle to a stop on the flat part of the landing zone. Behind me, my own fence stood intact, no damage, no panels broken. I'd flown over Carl's property line, landed on my own slope, never touching a blade of his grass. I shut the engine off, heart pounding steady, and popped the harness. Nate and Will jogged over, both grinning like idiots, slapping the side of the truck. That was insane, Nate said. Perfect arc, perfect landing. You cleared that fence like it was nothing, Will added. You should have seen Carl's face. I climbed down, legs buzzing, and walked with them toward the side yard where the viewers stood behind the rope. The officers were already waiting, hands on their belts, looking more impressed than concerned. Carl, on the other hand, was exploding. "Arrest him," he screamed, sweating so much his bright pink dress shirt stuck to his chest and stomach, black dress pants dark at the waistband. That was reckless endangerment. He could have crushed someone. He flew over community property. This is insane. The taller of the two officers held up a hand. "Mr. Carlson," he said calmly, "we received notice from Mr. Hall about this stunt." He explained his background as a professional driver, what safety measures he was taking, and that it would take place entirely on his own property. "He flew over our land," Carl yelled, voice cracking. "He flew over the Homeowner Association's land," the officer shrugged. "He didn't land on it," he said. "He didn't damage it. And our fire marshal rep agrees the risk to your property was negligible compared to what you did when you had your people seal his garage door shut." The fire inspector stepped forward then, a tall, solid man in a white shirt with a badge over one pocket. "Actually," he said, "I'm more concerned with your actions, Mr. Carlson. We've reviewed the photos and contractor report. You blocked a large, heavy vehicle into a space with no safe means of exit. If there were a fire, that's a hazard not just to the structure but to anyone responding." Carl sputtered. "It's a monster truck," he shouted, as if that explained everything. "Exactly," the inspector replied. "You don't just seal something like that behind steel and cinder blocks without a plan. We're drafting a report for the county. There will be consequences." I stood there, arms relaxed at my sides, feeling the sun hot on my shoulders, listening as the tide turned. Carl, in his sweat-soaked pink shirt and black pants, kept yelling, 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 but now the men around him weren't nodding. They were frowning. Some were shaking their heads. A neighbor named Carl, not the president, a different guy, stepped forward. "You sealed his door without talking to the rest of us," he said. "You said it was an emergency, but look at this. He did a controlled stunt in broad daylight with notice, with officials present. You're the one acting like a danger." The officers took statements. Nate gave his account as a contractor. The fire inspector asked me a few questions about the ramp design and the precautions I'd taken. "Have you done stunts like this before?" he asked. "Hundreds," I said, "but never at home until a man in a pink shirt decided to play jailer." He cracked a small smile at that. "Well," he said, "from where I'm standing, you did it safer than most people backflip off diving boards." Carl tried one last approach. "The Homeowner Association will fine you for this." He yelled, sweat dripping off his nose, his face such a deep red I wondered if his blood pressure was about to explode. "We will bankrupt you," I finally looked him in the eye. "You don't want to do that," I said quietly. "Because now I have footage, witnesses, reports, and a garage door you damaged. I can make this very expensive for you personally if you keep pushing." He opened his mouth to scream something else, but for the first time in weeks, he looked around and saw he didn't have a chorus backing him. Just a half circle of men staring at him like he'd gone too far. He snapped his jaw shut and stomped away, pink shirt dark with sweat down the spine. The officers left after shaking my hand, leaving me with a yard full of churned dirt, a ramp that had done its job, and a neighborhood that had just watched a homeowner association president get shown up by a man in a flannel shirt in a monster truck. But the story wasn't over. The stunt was the turning point. The fallout would be where the real damage landed. The county loved the video. I found that out 3 days after the jump, when a code enforcement officer and a county legal rep called me into a meeting at the municipal building on a bright, clear afternoon. We sat in a small conference room with big windows that let sunlight spill across the table. My phone propped up between us, playing the clip from 3 angles. The monster truck blasting out the back of my garage, flying cleanly over my fence, the crowd and officials in the foreground, and Carl in his pink dress shirt screaming at the rope line. The legal rep, a lean guy in a gray button-down, watched the footage twice, then opened a folder containing printed photos of my sealed front door. "So," he said, tapping the image of the steel plate, "this was done by the Homeowner Association under Mr. Carlson's direction?" "Yes," I said. "He hired a crew without my consent. They drilled into my brick, attached that plate, and mortared those cinder blocks across the base. My contractor's report outlines the damage." The officer flipped to another page. "And this video," he said, "shows your response, which took place entirely within your property boundaries and in the presence of law enforcement and fire personnel who had no objection." "Correct," I said. "I informed them all ahead of time." The legal rep leaned back, sunlight catching the edge of his glasses. "Mr. Hall," he said, "I can't officially endorse using a monster truck to make a point. But I can say this made it very easy to explain to the commissioners why we're moving forward with enforcement against your homeowner association." He explained the list: unauthorized construction, property damage, violation of fire codes, and overstepping of enforcement authority. The county would be issuing fines, requiring removal of the steel and blocks, and ordering the homeowner association to reimburse me for repairs to the door and wall. Additionally, they were flagging Carl's behavior for possible civil liability if he continued. You will probably want to pursue your own civil claim for damages, the rep said. We can provide our findings. I nodded. I intend to, I said. That same week, the Homeowner Association called an emergency meeting. It was scheduled for Saturday midday in the clubhouse with all blinds open. The notice went out on bright white paper slipped into everyone's mailboxes. Community safety discussion and leadership review. The irony made me laugh. On the day itself, I walked into the clubhouse in my usual black and red flannel, the sunlight flooding the room so strongly it erased any sense of cozy secrecy. The chairs were full. Men I'd only seen at a distance in driveways now sat shoulder to shoulder, arms crossed, faces serious. At the front, the Homeowner Association board sat behind a long table. Carl was there, pink dress shirt freshly pressed but already showing a dark patch of sweat at the chest, black dress pants creased, eyes flickering around like a trapped animal. Robert, the vice president, cleared his throat and started. We're here today because our association crossed a line, he said. A steel line, actually. A few guys chuckled. Carl shifted in his seat. Robert held up photos, my sealed garage, the steel plate catching daylight, the cinder block wall, the adhesive. He read from the county's letter, which lay on the table in a patch of sun, fines, violation codes, orders. This work was not authorized by the board as a whole, Robert said. It was pushed through as an emergency action by our president, Mr. Carlson, without proper votes, permits, or respect for property rights. Carl leapt to his feet. It was necessary. He shouted, sweat flying from his forehead. That man has a monster truck, we had to act. The room stayed quiet, nobody clapped, nobody shouted in agreement. Robert waited until Carl sat, then continued. The county found that the greater threat was trapping a heavy vehicle behind a sealed door, he said. They also noted that Mr. Hall, the owner of the truck, acted within his rights and conducted his stunt entirely on his property with notice and with officials present. He looked at me and nodded slightly. So today we will be voting on removing Mr. Carlson as president of the Homeowner Association, effective immediately, and barring him from holding any board position for at least 10 years. Carl's face went from red to almost purple. You can't do that, he yelled, pushing back his chair. You need my signature for enforcement, you need me. We need someone who understands limits, Robert replied. The vote wasn't close. Hands went up all across the bright room. When it was over, Carl stood alone at the front, pink shirt damp with sweat, breathing heavily. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked small, no authority, no backing, just a loud man in clothes that suddenly seemed like a costume. He tried to regain footing. We'll be suing him, he shouted, pointing at me. He embarrassed this community, he put lives at risk. Robert shook his head. No, he said. The board will not support any legal action against Mr. Hall. In fact, we will be working with him and with the county to repair the damage done to his property and to our reputation. When the meeting ended, Carl stalked out into the full sunlight, no one at his side. I watched him walk down the path, shoulders hunched, pink shirt almost glowing under the bright sky. A few weeks later, I heard he'd put his house up for sale. By then, the steel plate and cinder blocks were gone. The Homeowner Association paid Nate to restore the wall and install a brand new, better insulated garage door. The board also changed the rules. No emergency actions without full board approval, no construction on any member's property without written consent and documented rights, no tampering with access to someone's house or garage ever. On top of the county fines, Carl's little stunt became costly in another way. My lawyer filed a civil suit for the damage, the delay in my ability to use the truck for paid events, and the emotional stress of having my property caged. Faced with county findings and the video showing his ranting in front of officers, his attorney advised him to settle. The settlement check was big enough to cover all repairs, rebuild the ramp area into a nice terraced lawn, and build a proper detached workshop at the back of the lot where I could tinker without anyone hanging over me. Also added a clause, he was barred from contacting me directly ever again. On the day the settlement finalized, I rolled the monster truck slowly out of the new garage door in full midday sun, straight down the driveway, no ramps, no jumps. Neighbors came out to watch, some clapping, some just smiling. Will gave me a thumbs up. Looks better out here than behind steel, he said. Feels better too, I replied. The truck rumbled softly as I eased it onto the waiting trailer. No showboating, no revving. Just normal loading for a weekend event. As I strapped it down, I looked back at the house, at the fresh brickwork where the plate had once been, at the backyard where the ramp had been graded into a gentle slope again, bright grass already creeping back in the sun. I thought about how close I'd come to just ripping everything down and fighting Carl on his own terms. Lawyers, letters, screaming matches. Instead, I'd beaten him doing what I do best. Making trucks move in ways people don't expect under the brightest possible light with every camera rolling. In the end, the Homeowner Association learned something too. Power doesn't come from a pink shirt and a title. It comes from doing things the right way with respect for the lines that matter on the ground, on the page, and above a fence when a 10,000-pound truck flies through the air. Now, whenever I drive back into the cul-de-sac in my regular pickup, the place feels calmer. The new board keeps things simple. Cut your grass, park reasonable, don't be a jerk. My monster truck sits quietly in its bay between shows, door closed, no steel in sight. Sometimes, on bright afternoons, I stand at the edge of my yard and look at that fence I once jumped. The only sign anything ever happened is a slightly smoother patch of soil where the ramp used to be. That's enough reminder for me. When a homeowner association tried to cage my life, I chose not to crash through the front wall. I chose to fly over their property line instead.